Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber who asked a question because he's having a problem with tightness and cramping in his lower back when he's doing front squats, deadlifts, snatches, things like that. He's wanting to know what's going on there. He says his form is good, he records it, so he doesn't understand what the problem is. So, let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, do a little bit of crafting, and let's talk about this. Alright, there's 3 different potential issues that can be causing this, and I'm going to assume when you talk about tightness so bad it is almost like a cramp when it's actually impeding your ability to function, sometimes even impeding your ability to drive home later. Now, that being said, actually there's 4 different issues. I'm going to assume you're natty because you didn't mention any hormonal supplementation. That would be number 4. There are of course certain anabolics out there, particularly oral anabolics or oral prohormones that are over the counter. They can cause this by themselves, and they'll do it every time you train sometimes. If that's the case, you're going to have to discontinue your use of these substances. Pretty straightforward. Or you're going to have to mitigate your use at the very least. That's a problem. Now, as far as physical problems causing that aren't related to something you're putting into your body, number 1 is going to be hamstring tightness. Hamstring tightness is going to be very, very high on the list. For people who don't have enough hamstring flexibility, hamstring mobility, any of these exercises, squats, front squats particularly, even deadlifting, can cause your lower back to cramp up from training. And it's because when you squat down or you just do certain exercises, the snatch, like you said, is going to be a potential issue there. So you need to make sure your hamstrings are mobile, because what it does when you go down or you squat down under any sort of load, you're going to see if your hamstrings are too tight when you go to any reasonable depth. Sometimes even when you aren't even hitting depth. Sometimes if you're even squatting really high, this will be an issue. It will cause your pelvis to roll under a bit and put the wrong stress, because it will pull down on your pelvis when you squat down if your hamstrings are too tight. And what that will do is it will again pull your back. It puts a pulling on your back that you don't necessarily want. So don't want to get into all the actual physical terms for it. Just so the layman needs to know, it pulls on your pelvis in the wrong way and it puts stress on your lower back. And that can cause actually injury over time. It can cause you to pull little muscles in there. It can cause pulls and micro tears in your spinal erectors that you don't want, and then it also leaves your lower back less supported, right? And less support on your lower back itself from the muscles that protect it can potentially lead to injury. So that's a problem. That's your body telling you, hey, there's something wrong here. I'm getting little pulls in these spinal erectors. You need to quit what you're doing. This is going to hurt so bad that you're not going to be able to walk until you sort this out. So that's kind of what your body's doing there. So the best way to test your hamstring flexibility, reach up and stick your leg out straight and see if you can put it on a standard countertop in front of you and stretch. If you can't do that, if it's difficult for you to do that, really difficult for you to do that, you need to start stretching your hamstrings every day. Now, you could do that with hurdler stretches on your countertops. You can start with couches, but what I'm going to recommend, make sure that you aren't rolling your back forward when you stretch and pull on your foot to do any stretches with your hamstring up on a countertop, a couch, arm, anything like that. You need to keep a curvature in your lower back when you lean in and stretch. That is important because that can also put stress on your lower back that's going to be problematic that you're also going to notice later when you're training. So just be aware of that when you're doing stretches for your hamstrings. You need to work on your hamstring flexibility. That's number 1. All right. Number 2, after hamstring flexibility, you have a core that's too weak. Your abs are too weak, your obliques are too weak. You're using too heavy of a weight for your core to be able to support. And when you think about it, your entire core, your whole trunk, supports your lower back. It supports your lower back when you're training. And if you have muscle weaknesses in there that are really, really weak, particularly weak, it's going to not protect your lower back in the way that you want. And if that's the case, again, you're going to start getting pain in your lower back when you are training. Your entire core is too weak. That's definitely a possibility. So that's one of the reasons so many guys use a belt, is because they have a weak-ass core and the belt lets them get around it. I don't recommend you use a belt. I'm going to recommend that you make your core stronger. I would say start with something like planks. Start doing planks. Front planks are nice. You even add some side planks in if you can. eventually get to where you can do weighted planks. You need to strengthen your whole core up for it to give you better stability when you're doing these lifts. After you do that, also you can start doing standing crunches. Why standing crunches? Because you need your core and your abs to be stronger when you're doing these actual exercises. So you need to do those standing. You can do them standing with cables. You can do them standing with bands thrown up over any sort of rack. It can be a power rack, a chin-up station. It can be a cable crossover. Find something in your gym. Hell, you can find a tree in your backyard to throw a band over a thick branch, and you can do standing crunches with bands over your shoulders. Otherwise, you can just do cables if you don't have access to any bands. But I generally recommend bands. But you need to get your core stronger and your entire core stronger. You need your abs, your obliques, your spinal erectors, everything. But probably it could be abs and obliques could be the problem here. Start with those. You still could consider some extra lower back work on top of that if that's an issue. But that's probably not your issue. If anything, sometimes overtraining the lower back could be the issue. All right, that can be the issue, which comes to our next point. If it's not that your abs are too weak, or your obliques are too weak, or that your hamstrings have a tightness issue, there's something else going on here, and it could be the fact that you are simply overtraining your lower back. Or not so much overtraining, it's overreaching and it's not recovering, because overtraining is a physiological state of your entire body. But what you are doing is pushing your lower back way beyond its recovery abilities. All right, and that could be because you're doing very large volumes of these exercises. You're not deloading, you're not giving your lower back enough time to recover from the amount of workload you're doing. Simply put, doing too many deadlifts, front squats, snatches, power cleans, all that stuff with too much volume or too much frequency for your body to recover to the workloads that you are doing can cause your lower back to start getting too fatigued. All right, and what that will do over time, it will start cramping up on you. It will get really tight. It will start cramping, and this can be a problem. And that's talking about just the localized aspect of it, because any muscle can be pushed to the point to where this causes a problem. Think about it with your lower bicep insertions. Guys who do tons of deadlifting, tons of curls, tons of weighted chin-ups, what happens when you do too much volume on these things, on these exercises, and you don't give enough recovery? You start to get that throbbing in that tendon. It starts to hurt all the time. Sometimes it cramps up, it hurts. You can't do much with the arm, particularly when you're training, and then after you're done training or midway through your sessions, it can be absolutely crippling. All right, that's all the connective tissue getting overworked and not recovering. Well, think about that feeling you get there and apply that same thing to your lower back. All right, the same thing to your lower back. That could be happening. That's something I have to watch personally. I deadlift with a very, very high frequency sometimes. You guys have seen me do heavy deadlifts up to 3 days a week. You know what? If I do that more than a few weeks in a row, I have to start adding light days in. Why? Because my lower back will start to cramp. It won't be able to handle the workloads. Sometimes after when I've been doing that, if I've done 3 heavy sessions in a week sometimes that third session or fourth session in a row, my lower back will cramp so bad that when I sit down to try to drive in my car, I can't have my pelvis rolled forward. I have to sit with an arch and to try to drive, like this to keep my lower back from cramping on the way home, even driving. All right, that's a problem. That's something I've learned myself with very high frequency deadlifting, where you're doing pretty heavy weight. When you're repping 500 plus pounds, that frequency will really cause a problem there. It can be the same thing from the accumulation of exercises here. So you're going to have to take deloads. You're going to have to learn how to take lighter days. You're going to have to learn how to back off a little bit. The other thing to consider with that is that is also one of the signs you have of actual overtraining syndrome. One of the early signs of overtraining syndrome that is setting in is lower back cramping. All right, lower back cramping. There's a lot of other physiological symptoms there, such as elevated blood pressure, elevated resting heart rate, very large drops in strength. These are a lot of the symptoms there. Large drops in strength meaning up to like 25% loss in your weight you can do for any given reps, whether it's a single or a 5 rep max or whatever. It'll drop 20-25% oftentimes when you're starting to reach an overtrained condition or once you're into it. One of the really early signs is cramping of your lower back. Your lower back will start to cramp up, and what will eventually happen as you start to get into the overtraining syndrome a bit further, sometimes your lower back will start cramping when you're not training, It'll start cramping when you're driving your car, when you're sitting at your desk, and it will sometimes even start cramping when you're just laying there in bed at night. So what you need to consider there, if that's the case, it's time for a full-on deload. If you're starting to experience multiple symptoms of overtraining, not just little localized overuse, but systematic symptoms, the lower back cramping could be part of it. But it doesn't sound like you're there yet with what you're describing. So it could be, in your case, more of the localized issue. What I'm going to recommend is you start adding more light days with these things. Maybe reduce your volumes just slightly. All right, reduce the volumes just slightly. Start doing recovery techniques for your lower back. That means foam rolling. And when I say foam rolling, you keep that roller off the spine. You do not roll your spine. But you can get to one side, to a flank, to where you can put one side of just the spinal erectors on there and keep your spine off of it by being at a slight angle. Foam rolling your spinal erectors. Foam rolling your glutes. All right, these things can be very, very useful for your lower back. Doing hangs, where you just hang with your body weight off of a bar, so that it can help decompress your lower back a little bit. Soaking in really hot baths, getting your lower back, glutes and everything soaking in a hot bath, maybe with some Epsom salts, and I mean steaming hot baths. These things can all help you with recovery. These are all active recovery methods, and they're things that you can utilize here to help with that if you're having a localized overuse and recovery issue. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.